Boy, it looks like we frustrated poor Catherine.
Hopefully now that we're getting started, she'll be able to join. All right, well, it's 2 p.m., so I think we'll get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This is our second learning session as part of ACCT's Strengthening Rural Community Colleges initiative. I'm joined today by David Devier, Chad Parker, as well as Catherine Farwell, although we're having a little bit of difficulty getting her on video, but we will continue to work on that. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce our wonderful panelists and let them get started talking to you all about opportunities through USDA to develop housing on campus. So Chad Parker has worked with USDA Rural Development for 30 years. He's currently serving as the Acting Rural Housing Service Administrator. So he oversees all of Rural Housing Services programs, including the Community Facilities Program, which we'll be talking more about today. In his role as the Deputy Administrator for Community Programs, he's responsible for Community Facilities Direct Loans, Guaranteed Loans, Grants, Economic Impact Initiative Grants, Tribal College Grants, and the Rural Community Development Initiative. He previously served as Deputy Administrator in USDA Rural Development's telecommunication programs, cooperative programs, business programs, and single-family housing programs. Chad holds an MBA and a BS from the Pamplin School of Business at Virginia Tech. We're also joined today by David Devier, who is in his 42nd year in education. Before coming to Glen Oaks Community College, he served in a variety of roles at many different institutions, including Clark State Community College, Claremont College, University of Cincinnati, Owens State Community College, and Ohio Northern University. Among his many professional accomplishments is his work with the Higher Learning Commission as a consultant evaluator, and he's also served on numerous professional organizations and leadership positions. Dr. Devier holds a BA from Ohio Northern University, an MA from Kent State University, and a PhD from the Ohio State University. We're also joined by Catherine Farwell, who is an area specialist for Rural Development Community Facilities Program, where she's worked for 7 years. Prior to that, she was in the multifamily program for 3 years. And Catherine has resided in Michigan all of her life and has 2 children and 1 granddaughter. So I'm going to let Chad kick it off and tell everyone a little bit about the work that he does and some opportunities that might be available for your colleges. And in the meantime, I'm going to try and make sure that we have Catherine able to participate later on in the program.
Thank you, Rachel. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how USDA Rural Development works, and then I'll share some slides on the community facilities, loan and grant programs, and go through the basics of the program. So USDA Rural Development has about 4,000 employees and a little over 450 offices. 47 of those offices are rural development state offices, where we have a political state director and then a group of managers running the programs for each state. And below that, we have about 400 area offices where people are on the ground working as loan and grant specialists that go out and work the different programs, assisting in the development of rural communities. There's a broad array of programs that are worked through USDA Rural Development. There's electrification programs, working with rural electric co-ops, telecommunications programs, a variety of multifamily and single-family housing programs. There's water and environmental programs that provides assistance for water and sewer systems in rural areas, and a variety of business programs, loans, grants, relending authority for economic development and business development in rural communities. And then there's the community facilities program. And I'll now throw my slides up, I think, so that I can talk about those. Let's see if it, did that work? Did my slides come up?
Yes.
Great. So I'll put it on the screen share this way. I think that does it. There we go. So the Community Facilities Program offers a variety of funding options. There's the Community Facilities direct loans, guaranteed loans, and grants. Community Facilities direct loans are what we primarily see the education sector coming in for. We can lend and provide grants to public bodies, nonprofits, and Native American tribes. So our Community Facilities direct loans have a subsidized interest rate, and the loan is between USDA and the applicant entity. The purpose of our loans are for construction, expansion of facilities, or renovation of facilities, or to purchase equipment or vehicles. So basically hard assets. We have funded a vast array of purposes. I'll show a slide on our portfolio in a second. The areas that we're eligible to go into are communities of 20,000 or less for direct loans and grants, and 50,000 or less for guaranteed loans. And when I describe that, when I say 20,000 or less, the facility must be located in a town or city of less than 20,000 or out in the unincorporated area in the rural countryside. So they could not be located in a facility in an area that has a population greater than 20,000, a city or town with a population greater than 20,000. It also must primarily serve rural residents. So there's kind of two parts of that rural definition. So if you're up against a large city, if your facility was, community college was right up against, say, St. Louis, Missouri, we would look and make sure that the facilities that we were constructing are going to primarily serve people located out in the rural area. In FY21, we got about $2.5 billion in direct loan authority, about 30 million in grant authority, and 500 million in guaranteed loan authority. Overall, across the whole portfolio, we provided $1.8 billion in funding. So there was plenty of direct loan money left available that we didn't utilize. And the way that broke down was about 1.1 billion in healthcare facilities, 404 million in education facilities, and then the rest kind of across public safety and public buildings. So I talked about our eligible rural areas, 20,000 or less, and who could come in and apply: public bodies, community-based nonprofits, and federally recognized tribes. So we certainly, in the education, in the community college arena, we've certainly had community colleges that are public bodies come in. We've had all types of colleges that are set up on a nonprofit basis, small private colleges. We've had tribal colleges come in as a participant, or the federally recognized tribe assisting those tribal colleges to build a facility. The way our community facilities portfolio is broken down, we got about $12 billion right now that's funding that's out there and lent across rural America. 5.8, or about half of the portfolio, is in healthcare facilities. Another 3.6 is in education facilities, public buildings, things like the town hall or your county administration building. We have $1.2 billion, $1 billion in public safety, fire, rescue, police facilities, and the other $500 million for a broad array of facilities, from libraries to fairgrounds, all kinds of interesting things. We can fund about 105 different purposes, I think, are in the portfolio at this point. Our education portfolio, of that $3.6 billion that we're talking about, that accounts for about 1,600 projects located across rural America. Of that, 31 are for college dormitories, where we've lent $291 million, and 58 projects are for other college education and administration facilities, where we've provided an additional $308 million. During just this past fiscal year, we provided funding to 210 education facilities, and that's across a broad array of education facilities, K through 12, all kinds of technical education facilities, as well as community colleges and larger four-year private universities. Our CF direct loan is what we typically, because we have $2.5 billion available, typically more funding than we have people applying for. That's where we get a great amount of interest in the program. Right now, our interest rate, it's at an all-time historic low at 2.18%, 2.125%. Our term that we can put out if we're building, constructing a facility is either 40 years or the useful life of the loan. I think the average term that we typically see is 30 to 35 years on construction of a facility. If we're funding, say, a mobile van education facility or buses for a school facility, the term of the loan goes down 15 years, 20 years, depending upon how long we expect that equipment to last. We do require adequate security for the loan. Typically, we'll get a public body, either some sort of general obligation bond or a limited geo bond or some sort of revenue bond from the public facility. If it's a private organization, or if there's capability to take a lien with the public entity, we'll put a lien on the facility or a lien on the grounds of the campus. We'll work with the entity to determine what's the best collateral that's available. We do look at repayment ability. Our team goes through and does a fairly significant underwriting analysis of the financial capability of the organization that we're lending to. And there is a provision in there that says that if you're able to obtain commercial credit elsewhere, that USDA can't lend to you. So the program isn't there set up to compete with private sector lender. It's there to go in and assist those organizations that would have trouble receiving commercial credit. We also have a community facilities guaranteed loan, and that's specifically what we see most people coming in for is for projects that are over that 20,000 in population limit. If there's a town of 30 or 40,000 and they're still interested in receiving some community facilities assistance, we can go in and put a guarantee on a private sector loan. That interest rate isn't set by USDA. It's a private sector loan, so the rates negotiated between the lender and the borrower. The term, we can put up to a 40-year term on a guaranteed loan, but typically in the private sector market, we see about a 20 to 25-year maximum term. We do take a look at the security and the lender's underwriting, and what we do is we put an 80% guarantee on that loan. So if there's a default on $1 million of loss to a lender, our guarantee would cover $800,000 of that loss. There are some fees associated with it, an upfront fee of 1.25% on the loan note guarantee, and then an annual fee that usually the lender passes on to the borrower. So that is a potential option, and we have had some education facilities come in under the guaranteed program as well. Our grant program, I'll talk a little bit about it. It's $30 million. We take those grant funds and provide them across the country, breaking those out to each rural development state office. So a state office gets on average somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million that they're able to provide into projects across their state during any given year. So everybody tries to spread that out geographically and to as many projects as we can. So you see the average size grant being about $30,000 to $50,000. So that doesn't typically equate to building a facility. It's more often seen in equipment for, in a community college's case, equipment for a laboratory maybe, or equipment that's going to be used to train on some sort of specific technical skill. We've had community colleges come in and apply for those kinds of activities under the grant program. I think that's all for my slides. Let's see if I can figure out how to back this out now. That might be a problem. I'm usually a Teams user. There you go, stop share. I'm usually a Teams user, so Zoom sometimes throws me off. So I'll now turn it back over to Rachel, but I'll hang on to answer any questions anyone might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Chad. And before we turn it over to David to talk a little bit about his experience with the program. We did have one question come in through the Q&A. Joanna Anderson said she understands that Congresswoman Hartzler, has enabled slightly larger rural populations to apply for available funds in the second half of the year. Is this possible? We serve a very rural area, but are located in a city with a population of 22,000, which is in State Fair Community College in Sedalia, Missouri.
So we haven't seen the FY22 appropriation. Where we're most likely to see that language would be in the 22 appropriations bill. Right now we're under a continuing resolution. So we're still operating under the 21 appropriation bill, and what they've given us is about 3 months of the expected funding. So I haven't, until the law changes, there's not an ability to expand our rural definition. It's a statutory definition and would take a change in the law. There have been some recent changes in the law that allowed for us to not consider like prison populations as part of that population, which expands that capacity for some areas beyond what the decennial census says. But I'm not familiar with any changes right now for the 22 bill, but I also wouldn't necessarily expect to be.
Great, well, thank you. I'll turn it over now, David, to you if you want to get started and talk a little bit about your experience with the program and what you've been able to do for your students and your community.
Well, thank you, Rachel, and thanks, Chad. Very good overview. Hopefully, Catherine will be able to get it at some point. We're Glenose Community College, and it's in Southwest Michigan in St. Joseph County, very rural. The actual campus is 330 acres located in the middle of the county in the country. We're the only non-municipal water and sewer system in Michigan, which is an interesting thing in and of itself. And I perked up when I heard Chad talk about the sewer and the water stuff. But we made a determination about in 2015 that we were interested in doing housing for many reasons, and I'm sure there's a lot on this webinar right now that have some of those same reasons. And we initially thought we would have to use a developer to finance it, and in other words, lease them the ground, and they would own the facility, and at some future date, we would take the facility over. About a few months into that process of looking at using a developer, I learned of the potential of a USDA rural development loan. And after some initial investigation, determined that if we could do it, it would generally be the better move for the college because we would own the facility from the beginning. And as the years went on and the facility was paid for and paid down, that we would have a revenue stream. So that being said, we determined that we needed about a 100-bed facility. We ended up with a 106-bed facility. $6.5 million was the estimate to build it. We engaged an architect, and at that time, we engaged the USDA and started through the process. The process, I will have to say, is really not all that arduous. You think about the federal government, you think about bureaucracy, and you think about the challenges of that. But I can assure you, compared to trying to do a state project in my former life in Ohio and here in Michigan as well, they're much more arduous than the USDA loan process is. Yes, there's paperwork, there's a paper trail, there's a significant number of checks and balances, but all things being said, the local person that you work with, in our case, Catherine Farwell and Christine Maxwell above her, were just incredibly easy to work with, always right there at the ready to work through any concerns that might come up, and work through the process of design, work through the process of bidding, and through the construction and all the way to completion. Our loan rate on that loan is 2.375 for 30 years. As Chad mentioned, many times 30 years is about the maximum predicted life. Subsequently, not just speaking about the housing project, but subsequently, about a year and a half later, we returned to the USDA and borrowed another 2.2 million to do the renovation of our central concourse on campus. That was a little higher interest rate at that time, still for 30 years. And in both cases, very straightforward. We're able to master the process, work through all the things that you have to go through. Of course, with our infrastructure, we had plenty of collateral to stand behind all of this borrowing. And we were actually debt-free at the time that we started down this road. We had retired our last bondage not too long before this. So we went back into debt, but in a very, very simple interest, by the way, as well. So you can pay down anytime. And so it's a very straightforward program. And I would encourage anybody that has interest in housing facility on a rural campus, a rural serving area, to investigate it. And of course, we always have that tug of war between should a community college be in the housing business? They're supposed to be serving just the local residents who can easily commute and so forth. But I'm guessing I have a number of people on this call that know that it's not that simple, particularly if you have athletics. Housing for athletes is always very complicated in a rural community where housing stocks are very limited, and you have a situation where you're putting student athletes in subpar housing, and something come out of that aren't very good. So that, among the fact that you also may have specialty programs that you can draw students from a distance, and again, they would not be able to find local housing, so it inhibits the development of those kinds of programs, specialized programs. So again, I would have nothing but positive to say about the program. We've used it twice. When I learned from Catherine the other day that we're down to 2 1/8%, I've been thinking ever since about maybe making another loan to do some more work here on renovating this now 50-plus-year-old campus. So I would be happy to entertain any questions. And
can you hear me now, David?
Yes, Catherine. Yes.
Hello. We got me on an unmuted phone line, so that'll work.
All right. Well, thank you, Catherine. And again, Rachel introduced you. So let's first off here see if, well, let's maybe, Catherine, if you want to, did you hear most of what I was saying?
I did. I have it going through my my phone.
Okay. So I don't know if you want to add anything right now, if that's okay with Rachel and Chad.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, she said.
We don't want to put you on the spot. I know you had a little difficulty joining, but if there's anything you'd like to add to what David has shared kind of about his experience and getting colleges onboarded to doing something like this, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, David and I had worked with, speaking with Elma and Olivet College in the past to get them on board, and they have projects that are underway actually, doing great things for their campus. And then if there's any project that you have that you're contemplating, I'd strongly encourage you to let me know what it is, and let's see if it's something that we can make a dream come true for you. We do have, like Mr. Parker was saying, we have so much money available to help these rural communities, and what we did down at Glen Oaks was just amazing. Those kids had a place to go, and being like out in the middle of cornfields, they had a home. A lot of them didn't have the option to have vehicles to get back and forth. So this actually opened up the door for some of the students to continue education for their future. David was mentioning too, right now we're at 2.125%. Our rate does change quarterly. Excuse me, I'm trying to get over a virus here, but we can go up to 30 years on our loan, and there are no penalties for early payments. There are a lot of things that we do for the project that you're not having to pay for. Anything that we work on with you is a free service. So when it comes to historical reviews, environmental reviews, putting together the application, everything that goes into the project we do for free. it's part of the program to help make it favorable for the community that's looking to make an expansion and better their community.
Thanks, Catherine.
I would love to just put a question to you, David, while we wait and see if we have any participants who'd like to ask questions. But I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your decision to move forward with this program. You know, you'd mentioned investigating kind of USDA options, some other state options, but what was happening, you know, on campus? You had talked about, and Catherine as well, about, you know, students really needing something like this. But if you could talk through a little bit about what it looked like on campus, you know, as you were making this decision.
Well, of course, we have a board of trustees who are charged with the oversight, fiscal and otherwise, and they're elected. In our particular case, they're elected, and of course, they take that responsibility, you know, very seriously. So when you start to entertain the idea of, well, let's see about a housing project, there's an initial, you know, wow, that's something we've never thought about. We're a community college, we're serving this close by region here. And why does that make sense for us now and in the future? So you go through a process of establishing why that might be necessary. And in our particular case, I actually engaged a consultant to help us gauge a number of things. Housing stocks in the community is part of that. The cost of housing in the community was part of it. We also looked at what was our potential as far as how many beds we could legitimately fill each year. And all of that took about 6 months. And of course, over that 6 months, you continually discuss it, you educate the board. And I'm going to sit here and say you have internal education to do as well, because you have folks that have been, you know, with the college for many years. And when they first heard of it, they were like, that doesn't sound like anything we ought to be doing with our money and otherwise. So it took a good 6 months to get the majority of the institution's internal community and the board of trustees first and foremost. And I would also say external community to some extent as well. I went around and spoke to a lot of, you know, service clubs and all kinds of folks and explained to them why we were doing it, because they pay property tax here toward the community college. Of course, I had to ensure them that we were not using any of their money to do this, that this was going to be built with a loan, and the loan would be repaid with the housing fees over the years to come. And that at about the 15-year mark, we would have a pretty significant return on investment. And of course, 20 plus years out, we would have an annual income that would be very supportive of the rest of the activities at the college. So folks took to the idea eventually. I can't say that I was able to do it overnight. It took me 6+ months. By that time, we had everything in place with the USDA. We went ahead and engaged an architect and moved forward very quickly from there. We actually, from the groundbreaking to occupancy was less than a year. We actually went into it in the fall, which wasn't the greatest. As Catherine will remember, it was a cold day when we when we did the groundbreaking, and we had a target of August the 27th, I believe, was the date that we would bring students to campus to start the year, and we made it with about 3 hours to spare. So all in all, it was a great project. And of course, now, pleasing to me, of course, is everybody's like, oh, this was a heck of an idea. We should have done this a long time ago. So you always feel good. If you're in the leadership position, then it turns out, you know, all well, you know, that's very pleasing. And of course, I should tell you this too, not to be arrogant or whatever, but it has my name on it. So I'm always invested in having it be successful.
Well, I'm glad that it is a success and that you've got some community buy-in now as well. We've had a couple of questions come in through the Q&A in the chat. So Jessica Williams is asking if this is something that we're interested in, how should we get started? Do we go through our local offices? How does the process start? And then also, if they're to apply for a grant, is this a one-time opportunity or annual for different projects? How does that work?
So I think the best way to contact us is through the Rural Development State Office. There's both a state director, that's a political position appointed by the administration that serves in, I would say every state, but up in the very Northeast. We've got one office for Vermont, New Hampshire, and one office for Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, just because of the size of the rural areas in those states. But every other state has a state office there, and there's a state director as well as a community programs director who actually runs the community facilities program in that state. You can get that contact information from our website, www.rd.usda.gov. So you can go to our rural development website. There's a map there. You can click on it and it'll show you who your community programs and state director are. Or if not, you can email me, chad.parker@usda.gov, pretty easy. And I'll make sure to make a contact with anybody who's interested in our program with the people who are working it in that state office. I'll also send out my slides to you, Rachel, so you can share those. And I've got a slide at the end that has contact information there.
Great. Thank you so much, Chad. And we'll also, with ACCT as part of this initiative and the Strengthening Rural Communities College program, we'll be putting out some one-pagers with technical assistance. And so you can be on the lookout for that soon. And that will include kind of a step-by-step as a follow-up to this webinar. You know, if this is something that your institution is interested in, you know, I know that the USDA site, I'm sure, has everything you need available, but we'll be throughout this project kind of accumulating all of the information that we share on the webinars in one place as well. So we've had a few more questions come in. Roberto O'Neill had a question for you, David, just about how many students attend your college.
We're stabilized now at about 1,250. We have a pretty significant percentage of dual enrollment, high school dual enrollment that counts inside of that. The housing is 106 beds. We've last couple of years held a couple 2-room suites out for quarantining if we needed to. But year one, we were at, I think, 89% full at the beginning of the year, and every year since. First year was 17, 18, we were 89%. And ever since then, we've been 100% with the waiting list when the school year started. So if you actually count our post-high school students, we house about 20% of our post-high school students.
Great. Another question from Chris Kuberski, excuse me if I've massacred your last name, my apologies, who said, we're considering updating and expanding our athletics facility to create an events center. Would this project fall within the scope of this loan? If so, we're about to do a feasibility study. Is that included in your services?
So athletic facilities are kind of in the gray area. If it's an education facility, we absolutely can be involved in that. So if there was a gymnasium where physical education classes were going to be taught, athletic fields where physical education is going to take place, then we can definitely fund those. If we can't fund a stadium for recreational purposes. So if it's going to be solely for the use of recreational events, we can't fund recreation facilities. I think in most cases for community colleges, we can be involved in those types of projects. So on our funding, we can wrap in the costs of professional services, feasibility studies, plans, specs, those types of things into the cost of the facility. But we have to be funding a facility itself. So we don't provide upfront funding to do feasibility studies or plans and specifications for a project. It would have to be as part of the cost of that project.
Great, thank you. And then another question, again, pretty in the weeds, I guess, asking about the rate changes. So since those change as Catherine mentioned, quarter to quarter? Are there provisions and rules regarding refinancing?
So the way the rate changes work, it changes quarterly. It's based upon municipal bond index. But once the rate is in place, it's locked in at that time, and it's a fixed rate for the term of the loan. We don't presently right now have provisions that allow us to refinance our present loans that we have in the portfolio. So the refinancing that we can do has to be a minor portion of the project. So if I say somebody was building a dormitory facility and that dormitory facility was going to cost $5 million, if I guess that would be a low cost for a dormitory facility, but let's say it's going to be $5 million. If there were other projects that they had debt out on for that community college campus, say they had another $4.5 million for a laboratory facility, we could take it and make a $9.5 million loan and refinance that $4.5 million laboratory facility. It would have to be for something that would have, that refinancing would have to be for something that was already eligible for our program, and it would have to be smaller than the construction part that we're involved in. So we couldn't refinance $7 million and construct $5 million in facility. So it has to be a smaller portion and would have to already be eligible, would have been for an eligible purpose for our loan.
Great, thank you. And then another question.
One more note on,
Go ahead.
we're talking about the interest rates. We have another great aspect of our program is there's two options for an interest rate. One, when we obligate the funds, that's your rate that you have. And then we'll say we get to the closing, and if the rate drops lower, you can select that lower rate at the time of closing. So you have two options for rates. So you have one at obligation, and then you have one when it comes to closing. If the rate's gone down, you can accept that as well.
But if the rate's gone up, if the rate's gone up, Catherine, correct, you could still stick with what you locked in.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you. That's really helpful context, and I'm sure that's helpful for institutions. Another question from Brad Bowen. Can this be a direct loan to the college, or is it set by state statute? Or does it have to go through a different entity, such as a building authority?
So I think it depends upon, we have lent directly to community colleges. We've also lent to, say, affiliate organizations, authorities, and even in some cases for private colleges to their foundations and it depends upon, a lot of it is based on state law and whether they have the authority to borrow. And then when we take a look at their other credit provisions as well, whether they have access to some large portion of funds, say a large state university, like Virginia Tech, I'll say. We would not ordinarily lend to Virginia Tech because they have access to other state resources. But often we find that community colleges don't have that same access.
To help determine where we're standing with the funding for the project and who's going to hold the loan, we will review audits. The audits help us determine how the funding is procured and used into the college. So we'll, excuse me, we have quite in-depth conversations, which Dr. Devier is very well aware of, and we cross the T's and we dot the I's, and we make sure that everything's in place because we don't want to have any issues that come back through. We walk you through the whole process of getting the application going, completing the application, get the obligation, get the bidding process done legally. There's a lot of times that that's not done, so we'll oversee that as well, making sure that that's done legally. And then we work with your bond counsel. We work with your attorney. We're just here. We just try to make it an easiest process as possible.
Fantastic. We've had another question come in as well, asking if there's any anecdotal information about investments in housing supporting student enrollment. So I can answer just very broadly based on the work that we've done here at ACCT with rural institutions over the last 2 years. And then David, if you want to speak to your experience on campus, but I can say we absolutely have heard that anecdotally. You know, we haven't really dug into it in a very methodological research way, but absolutely that's something that you know, has come up in speaking to rural institutions in the 5 states that we where we interviewed college leadership and spoke to a lot of rural communities, that you know, institutions that were able to support student housing were able to kind of maintain or expand enrollment numbers. And we spoke to a number of institutions that were looking for ways to do that, you know, because they had heard from the community that this is something that was needed and this would support enrollment. I don't know if that echoes sort of your experience on campus at Glen Oaks.
Oh, absolutely. I guess the one thing I would say that it's really changed the whole campus environment. You know, when you're a commuter only college, people come, they hit their class, and they go. And when you have students on campus 24/7, it changes everything. And most of those things that are positive. There, of course, now you got students on campus 24/7 and they've got time on their hands and things like that. And of course, I spent a lot of years at 4-year institutions, residential institutions, so I was thoroughly prepared for that, I'll say. But we really had no significant issues whatsoever. There's no question in my mind it's helped our enrollment to be stable. And actually, until the COVID hit, we had gone up semester to semester, year to year for 5 or 6 years in a row. But having a housing facility that is modern and comfortable and exciting, compared to putting a student athlete from Indianapolis, you know, in a subpar rental in a neighboring city, it's pretty obvious how valuable that is to build a community inside of the housing that's a sub-community, a sub-part of the campus, and then have that spill over into the whole campus. And actually, the second loan that we had on the renovation of our central concourse, and Catherine would know this as well as me, it was a very drab and dreary brutalist architecture edifice. Just god-awful ugly is what I would say. And and we turned it into an amazing space with the funds that we borrowed. And that has also changed the spirit of the campus dramatically as well. We would not have done these 2 projects, I do not believe, if we wouldn't have been able to get these low interest, simple principal loans.
That's really great, and it's so wonderful to hear about, you know, the way that it's really changed your campus as well. And of course, we know there are always issues when you have students on campus all the time, but it's great to build that community as well. So I think for the moment, we don't have any other questions that have come in, but I'll give everyone an opportunity to continue to ask anything that comes to mind. And in the meantime, I can speak just a little bit more about what the work that we're doing here at ACCT and kind of what this whole webinar is supporting today. And so for those of you who may not be aware already, we are in our 2nd phase of our Strengthening Rural Community Colleges initiative. And part of the reason that we invited all of our wonderful panelists today is that through the 1st phase of the initiative, we were really doing a lot of fact finding. We spoke to over 500 people, trustees, presidents, and other rural college leaders, as well as a number of federal agencies and state agencies, to get a better understanding of what the needs are at our rural community colleges and different areas in which they're already very successful. And campus housing and the ability to access federal dollars and different federal programs was something that we heard loud and clear was of interest, which is why we put this together today. This is the 2nd in our learning series, so we'll continue to have webinars about once a month. I think we are looking to schedule something for November, and then we may skip December for the holidays. And we'll continue to have programming in the new year as well. You can also be on the lookout for those of you that are registering for our National Legislative Summit in February. We'll be holding a Rural Summit Day as part of that, and inviting a number of different federal agencies to come and do something somewhat similar to the presentation that you heard today, as well as kind of give an opportunity for some office hours. And so allowing our colleges to interact with agencies and find out firsthand what kind of opportunities are available, and make sure that we're really trying to pull down that barrier of, where do I even begin? Is this program something, that could work for me? And so that's a little more of a preview into the work that we're doing. If you didn't see yesterday, we sent out a survey. So we had heard that, this was a topic that was of interest, but as we continue the program, we want to make sure that the content that we're providing is things that are useful for our institutions. And so if you have other ideas about things that you'd like to see, or if you, have a really great program on your campus that you'd like to share and have others learn about, we would love to hear from you. So please get in touch. If you didn't see that email, you can reach out to me. I'll drop my information here in the chat as well. And would be happy to share that and have more participation and involvement in this great initiative. And I still don't see that we have any additional questions. So unless anyone wants to jump in, please.
Rachel, I want to circle back to the one thing Chad said, that the upfront study, the upfront, investigation is going to be on the, on the college's docket. You're not going to have the USDA help you figure that out. And it's not free, it takes an investment to do that. There are many good organizations out there, consultants and such, to help you investigate that. Like I said early on, I would just reiterate that a little bit. We actually started out thinking we would use a developer and that they would own the facility, and we would just give them a lease, $1 a year lease or whatever for the land that the facility sat on campus. And because we started that direction, we engaged that investigation just to even conceive of doing it that way, because you couldn't get any serious investment organization to consider coming in and building a facility unless you could show them that you had, the need for it, and that there was going to be rent coming in, in the years to come. But you would have to do that no matter what. Any good board of trustees is going to ask you to, as an administrator, to make sure that you've investigated it thoroughly and it's a pretty sound investment. And the USDA wants to know the same. And Catherine referred to that also. They want to know that you can fill it. They want to know that you've got the wherewithal to pay for it.
Yeah, thank you so much for following up and kind of filling in that information. Well, I think, like I said, it seems that the questions have gone quiet. And so if there's any of our wonderful panelists would like to share some additional closing thoughts, that'd be great. And then happy to give everyone a few more Zoom-free minutes in their day today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yep, we certainly appreciate at USDA the opportunity to talk about our programs and to share them. If anyone has interest, please reach out. I emailed you the slides, Rachel. Please share with the group, and that way they'll have good contact information for USDA. Thank you.
Great, absolutely. And for those of you who might have others on campus who weren't able to join today, or colleagues that may be interested, this webinar will be available on demand on our website in the next few days. And like I said, be on the lookout as well. We'll be sharing a brief one-pager kind of summarizing some of the info from today and from past webinars to help you all make sure that you're connecting with these resources. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.